This is the Louie T Network. You are now officially in the lab room. It's that time again. It's that time again to go hard in the off season, cause we trying to win. We gon' go so hard, we don't take no days off. Hopefully one day it's all gonna pay off.
Hey, yo. Who else could it be? With me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the 2017 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series, where your man, Louie T, aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2017 NFL Draft using our baseball grading scale, single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts here in the Draft Wrap-Up Series. We cannot tell how these players are going to pan out. I don't want to discount any of these young men before they get their chance in the National Football League. And so we will get a score for each and every single player selected in said team's draft. We'll apply bonuses when necessary, get an aggregate score, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right, you, the viewer out there, are in total control, as this is the up format. Simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos in this series stating two things: the team you'd like to see next and the phrase next. A couple examples would be Cleveland next, Browns next, Browns, next Cleveland. You don't want to get too wordy because, again, this is a very competitive exercise. If you try to go Cleveland Browns next, that might be too long. Someone might get in, sneak under your comment. So, again, fast is usually first. Want to be as efficient as you can possibly be in this series. So, had a great time this year. You guys are doing well. Let's keep it up as we go to the next team picked by you, the viewer out there, the Cleveland Browns. And I'm here to tell you this was one of the best drafts of 2017. And you don't get many drafts like this where there's this many players, but it's quality throughout. Ever since John D. Podesta and Sashi Brown have come on board with this Browns organization, I think things have been on the up and up. Now, you might not agree with all of the moves they've made thus far, but they've all had rhyme and reason to them. And this whole Moneyball approach and the thought process behind what they've done since coming in, more is better. Let's take more shots at the hoop. Let's throw more darts at the board. I love this philosophy when you don't have a ton of talent. And I think they've acquired a ton of talent over the last couple of years with that thought process and mentality, like more is better. I'm usually a guy that loves 7 selections. Get in the draft, get out. 6 is cool with me. 7 is that round number that I'm looking for. 10 is generally too many for me, except when you need more talent. The Browns need more talent. And when you get this type of quality, we make fun of the Browns all the time for all of the moves that they make, all of the assets that they acquire, but they never actually make good use of those assets. This is the first time we can actually say, I think the Browns have actually made good on the assets acquired over time. Now, again, on paper, this all looks great. How do these players perform, and will they be coached up correctly? A lot of guys that come through this league can play. They just don't have the adequate coaching, and they don't land in the right situation for their talents to flourish. Will that be the case with the Cleveland Browns? We're going to find out. We all love Hugh Jackson, think he's the guy for the job. Now he's going to start getting talented football players. Again, the question becomes the quarterback position. We'll talk about that because there is a pick in here that will address that position as well. But let's jump into this draft because I thought it was an extraordinary draft by the Browns throughout, and I want to jump into it right now. We're going to start in the first round, first overall pick in the 2017 NFL Draft. The Cleveland Browns select Texas A&M defensive end Myles Garrett. This was a no-brainer. I know we talked about were the Browns going to be foolish enough to spend this pick on a quarterback. We all thought that there may have been some conversations behind closed doors as to whether this pick should be spent on a quarterback, which this franchise desperately needs, or you go after the can't-miss, surefire prospect in Myles Garrett. Look, when you're drafting that high to draft and you got the #1 overall pick, you entertain every single scenario that can take place. And that even includes trading out of the #1 overall selection. However, if you're going to stand pat, you must take the best player available. If you don't feel that is a quarterback, then you do not make that selection. I think that was the prevailing thought. The Browns made the right decision in my mind, and I think the minds of many people around league circles, and a lot of people out there watching this video as fans feel the same way. You don't pass on a guy like Myles Garrett. He's big, he's strong, he's fast, he brings a lot of things to the table, and I talked about this on numerous occasions. I continue to harp on this, and I'm going to continue to talk about this because this is the nature of the NFL. It's about quarterbacks and the ability to affect quarterbacks. The Browns currently don't have a quarterback, but this is a guy that can affect quarterbacks, and that's going to give them an opportunity. I'm not going to break Myles Garrett down for obvious reasons. The biggest being, I've already broken him down in the 2017 NFL Draft Prospects 101 series. So if you're looking for a thorough breakdown of Myles Garrett, that's where you need to go on the Louie T Network in the playlist section, Draft Prospects 101 series. But again, they made the right decision here. He's a once every so often, once in a generation, generational talent. We said that, and he looks a lot like and a guy that he's been compared to throughout this process, Jadeveon Clowney, and Clowney was about 3 or 4 years ago. So guys like this don't come around very often, but we've seen more of them of late. It reminds me of when J-Pep came out, and then a few years later, you got Super Mario. Same instance here with you get Clowney, and then 3 or 4 years down the road, you get Myles Garrett. I think they're very comparable. This guy has the complete package, and I think he's only going to get better with time. And so in the first round, first overall pick, Texas A&M defensive end, Myles Garrett. Is it up? He's hit deep. Out of hit. The home run for the Cleveland Browns in the first round. Again, the Browns may not be where they want to be because of the lack of firepower offensively, specifically the quarterback position. But if you can get after the other team's quarterback, you can keep your team in ball games. They're going to be a lot more competitive, and they were competitive for the most part last season. They're going to be even more so competitive because of guys like Myles Garrett in that lineup affecting the other team's offense. This is a great pickup for the Cleveland Browns. It was a smart decision. It was the right decision for the Browns with the #1 overall pick in the 2017 NFL Draft. As we move on to the next first round pick, Browns traded back in the first round, had 2 first-round selections to start the draft, moved back, allowed the Texans to come up and select Deshaun Watson at 12, and in effect, pick up a couple of selections later on in the draft. One was another first-rounder, the other a second-rounder, which they coupled together to move back into the first round. So 3 first-round selections. Here's the second of those 3 selections. 25th overall pick, Michigan, linebacker, safety, running back, you name it, he did it. Jabrill Peppers, Mr. Everything, is the selection. And this is a guy that, again, another one of these guys, not necessarily being able to put them in a box may have hurt them because you look at Peppers, you look at his skill set, he could have easily fallen out of the first round just because you don't know where to put him. You don't know where his position actually is on the football field. He claims to be a safety. I don't know about that. Let's talk about what this guy brings to the table, though, because, again, much like Adoree Jackson, a guy that just kind of does everything, you want to find a home for him. A guy, like we talked about with the Carolina Panthers in Curtis Samuel. Never, ever trust a man with 2 first names. You want to find a home for these guys who are athletes, but you just don't know exactly what to do with them. Here's another case, an example, and I think maybe the biggest one we have in the 2017 NFL Draft. His pros, tremendous athleticism. You saw it at the Combine. You saw it on tape, whether it's the Rutgers game where he single-handedly tears them a new one on the special teams front, almost running back 3 kicks, having one called back, running another one back. Whether it's the Penn State game where he was phenomenal on special teams yet again, where you watch him on at the linebacker position. This is the guy, 4'4", 640, was a 100 and a 200 meters runner in high school. A guy that's a 35-inch vert. and 10'6" broad guy. So, I mean, this guy's dripping, oozing with athleticism. He's so comfortable out on the football field, which is the next pro. Outstanding movement skills. He just makes his movements on the field look so effortless. This guy can get from point A to point B very fluidly, doesn't waste a lot of motion, doesn't waste a lot of steps. So that bodes well for when you ask him to do things like blitz, which is another pro, excellent blitzer. I love my Jabrill Peppers. I can't speak for anybody else. I love my Jabrill Peppers up around the line of scrimmage as a nickel linebacker, being nosy, blitzing, run blitzes, blitzing after the quarterback, being aggressive around the line of scrimmage. I like my Jabrill Peppers at linebacker as a nickel linebacker hovering around the line of scrimmage. That's how I like my Jabrill Peppers. I can't speak for anybody else and what you like Jabrill Peppers to do defensively. I know as a defender, I like my Jabrill Peppers aggressive, up around the line of scrimmage, being nosy, blitzing, and doing an assortment of things. And that includes covering guys out of the backfield. So physicality is the next pro. This is a guy that is extremely physical. He's willing to put his body on the line. If they're running a toss and that guard comes out to pull, he's willing to take that guard out and sacrifice his body for the good of the team. He's one of those guys that if he sniffs out screen or he sniffs out a hitch, he'll attack it downhill, smash the ball carrier. He's one of those guys that will be physical. He doesn't always win, but he's going to give you maximum effort and a high level of physicality most times when he comes up to play the football. Versatility is probably his biggest caveat. The one thing that got him selected in the first round is all of the many talents that this man provides for the team that selected him in the Cleveland Browns. This guy brings a ton of things to the table. You're talking about a guy that played running back at Michigan, a guy that did the Wildcat at the quarterback position at Michigan, a guy that played the linebacker position and was a damn good one to me, which is why they made him register as a linebacker at the combine when he really wanted to be labeled as a safety. Also played the safety position. I don't think he's as great at safety as he is at linebacker, but that's nor here nor there right now. Also kick returner and punt returner. Thought he excelled more so as a punt returner than a kick returner, but he gives you some dynamic and explosive ability in both realms of special teams return game. So this is a guy that has so many different characteristics, and I think he can actually throw the football. Michigan set him up to throw it a couple of times. Would not shock me at the next level if he got some snaps on the offensive side of football, runs a little bit of Wildcat because they don't have a quarterback. You saw Hugh Jackson throw everybody and their mama back on the Wildcat last year. Wouldn't shock me if Jabrill Pepper got his turn to take a couple swings at it and actually threw the football in 2017. So that's something to keep your eyes out for as well. And special teams value is the final pro. Obviously, the guy's a tremendous punt returner. Had a couple of touchdowns, I think 2 or 3 for the Michigan Wolverines in 2016, and had one call back versus Rutgers as well. He's dynamic. Almost scored another one versus Penn State when he tripped down around the 5 or 6 yard line or so. This guy's dynamic as a returns man, and I think that's a position that he can get on the field immediately at the next level with this Cleveland Browns football team. You go from his pros to his cons. He's not a true single high safety. I don't think that safety, even though he considers himself a safety, I don't think safety is his most natural position. Now, I'm not saying he can't play the safety position. I just think he's much better suited to be up around the line of scrimmage. Now, again, at 5'11", 213, how much do you want him up around the line of scrimmage? We asked the same question with Sua Cravens a season ago. Redskins elected to make him a nickel linebacker. Even in some base sets, he was playing inside, but he saw himself as more naturally a safety. That's where Sua Cravens is moving to now. So the same thing may happen for Jabrill Peppers. We'll see. I don't think his responsibilities are met when he's at the safety position. I think he's too nosy. I think he allows guys to get behind him. I think of a game where I want to say it might have been Wisconsin early in that ball game, or Nebraska. So one of these teams where he's in a cover 2 look. The safety on the opposite side of the field is coming up to play a tight end on a shallow route. And Jabrill Peppers' role in that particular defense is to get back, and it really was more of a cover 3 disguised in a cover 2 shell. And his job was to stay back, was to be deeper than the deepest over the middle of the field. He was being nosy. He was eyeballing the quarterback. Quarterback was able to manipulate him, froze him. He then tries to get back. It's too late. Ball goes over the top for a touchdown early in that ball game. So I just don't think he's a true single high free safety, even though he has the athleticism to do it. I just don't think he's disciplined enough to get that done. You move to his next con, he does not wrap up. He loves to come in for the big kill shot, loves to lower the boom with his shoulder, does not wrap up enough for me. At the next level, a guy of his stature, of his ilk, may be able to be bounced off of, and guys will continue to pick up yardage after his contact. I'd love to see him be a little bit more sure of a tackler and wrap guys up and get them to the ground. And then finally, the biggest con that a lot of people had, I don't really complain about this, but I know a lot of people did, was his ball production and defensive playmaking ability. Never forced a fumble at Michigan. Only had one career interception, and you remember that was in the Ohio State game, one of his final games of his career, because he didn't play in the bowl game due to an injury. So that Ohio State game, in effect, was his last collegiate game. And that was a tip pass that he just ended up having fall right into his hands. So this is not a guy that made plays. A lot of people wanted to compare him to Charles Woodson, a guy that he idolized, which is why he went to the University of Michigan in the first place, but he didn't make enough plays. Charles Woodson was a bona fide playmaker in college and at the next level, which is why he's going to be a Hall of Famer in the near future. Jabrill Peppers hasn't showcased the ability to make plays on the football while in coverage, hasn't showed the propensity to force fumbles, which was a specialty of one Charles Woodson, who would come in with a vicious bolo punch. We haven't seen any of those things from Jabrill Peppers. We've just seen this guy be dynamic in the returns game and be a guy that's physical around the line of scrimmage, but making plays on the ball has not been something he's done with a lot of success at the collegiate level. And a lot of people want to see that from him moving forward, which is why I think he's better up around the line of scrimmage and not as a safety away from the line of scrimmage. So we'll see what happens with him. But again, another one of these picks for a team that doesn't have a ton of talent, that is starting to acquire a ton of. You look at the last two drafts, I think the Browns are now one of the more talented teams at a number of positions that have a lot of depth on their roster. And it's guys like Jabrill Peppers that are going to add to that depth and talent base for this Browns football team. In the first round, 25th overall selection, Michigan, Mr. Do-It-All, Jabrill Peppers is hit hard. He's hit deep. You can put him on the board. Yes. It's another home run. Back-to-back jacks for the Cleveland Browns in the first round. And if you got three, you better hit three. And you need to go 3 for 3. And so we're going to go to the next first round pick. Yes, third of the first round. 29th pick overall. Miami tight end David Njoku is the selection. This is a big physical specimen. Not going to break him down. Have already done so in the 2017 NFL Draft Prospects 101 series. So again, if you're looking for him and some other guys that I was able to get to before the draft took place, that's where you need to go. But I'll say this about Njoku. He gives them an element that they had briefly when they had Kellen Winslow once upon a time. Gary Barnidge was outstanding for them a couple of years ago, but this is a different level type of athlete we're dealing with here. A guy that is a mismatch nightmare. And I told you, this is now becoming a tight ends league in terms of the passing game. These guys are creating mismatches at the tight end position. These guys are being flexed out. These guys are winning in the red zone. These guys are winning on third down. These are the guys that are creating mismatches on a week in, week out basis, that offensive coordinators are scheming up ways for them to be isolated with linebackers and safeties, mismatches that they can win on a consistent basis. If you have one of these physical freaks at the tight end position, you can do special things offensively. This guy, David Njoku, is the quintessential freak at the tight end position. He's big, he's strong, he's fast, and oh, by the way, he also blocks, which is a rarity in today's NFL, getting college players at the tight end position who can catch, who are athletes, who can also block. So that is also a big coup for this Browns team with this selection of David Njoku in the first round, 29th overall selection. Miami tight end David Njoku. Home run! Back to back to back jacks for the Cleveland Browns as they go 3 consecutive home runs to start their draft. And again, when you got 3 first round picks, you need to hit them all out of the park. And I thought the Browns did that phenomenally in the 2017 NFL draft. I don't know if I've ever had a draft, and I may have, Okay, I would have to go back into the archives, but I don't know if I've ever had a draft start out with 3 consecutive home runs to start out a draft. This is phenomenal drafting. I love the way they maneuvered and took their resources and packaged it up to get more picks, and then to come up and get a guy in the first round that can enhance their offense tremendously in a passing league. Love that selection of David Njoku to wrap up their 3 first-round picks. As we go to the second round, and this was a controversial pick. We knew it was going to happen at some point, but we didn't know when. Second round, 52nd pick overall, Notre Dame quarterback Deshaun Kaiser is the selection. Again, not going to break this guy down. Already did in the Draft Prospects 101 series, but again, Deshaun Kaiser brings a number of things to the table with this Browns football team. He's going to get an opportunity to compete. I don't think he's ready to start, but we said the same thing about Dak Prescott last year, and look what he did for the Dallas Cowboys. Totally different situation, totally different infrastructure. Their offensive line was ready to go. Their running back position was ready to go. They had skill guys that were ready to go. That team was ready to go. They just needed a quarterback. That's not the case in Cleveland, and this is not a quarterback that I think everybody feels good about, like we felt about Dak Prescott. I think we felt good about Prescott. We felt like he was a guy that at one point was a Heisman candidate in his career at Mississippi State. We knew Dak Prescott could do a lot of things. We questioned his pocket passing ability, and then we saw it his final year at Mississippi State. Deshaun Kaiser, we didn't see a lot out of him in 2016. As a matter of fact, I think he took a major step back from his 2015 performance at Notre Dame that led them to the Fiesta Bowl versus the Ohio State Buckeyes in a loss. But nonetheless, it was a tremendous season for Kaiser. 2016, I thought he took a monumental step back. Notre Dame was horrible. He had opportunities to win games in the fourth quarter, did not show up in some crucial situations, made a lot of mistakes. I thought he tried to put the team on his back when all he needed to do was just go out and play confident football. I think he was a guy that was a little immature at Notre Dame as well. His coach spoke to that, said that he should be back at Notre Dame, and he didn't come back. So there are a lot of questions surrounding Deshaun Kaiser. Is he mature enough? Does he get it? All the intangibles in terms of his skill set and his size and his abilities, they're all there. It's all about being coached up. We love Hugh Jackson. We think he can coach up quarterbacks. Here's a guy and an example of, if Hugh Jackson is what he says he is, this is a guy that he should be able to turn into an NFL starting quarterback at some point. May not be in his rookie season, but at some point, Deshaun Kaiser should be starting for the Cleveland Browns, and it would not shock me if it happened at some point in 2017 in the second round, 52nd pick overall. Notre Dame quarterback Deshaun Kaiser for me is a triple. I look at this guy and what he brings to the table from a talent standpoint, size, arm strength, athleticism, mobility, being able to throw on the run, all of those things, he possesses those in spades. It's the mental approach to the game that I worry about. Is he mature? Is he willing to put in the film work and the study? Can he stop making the crucial mistakes at the most critical juncture of the football game? These are all things that they're going to have to work on. Footwork, playing from underneath the center, which is something he didn't do at Notre Dame very often. So this is a guy that, again, if Hugh Jackson is the quarterback coach that we think he is, this is a guy that he should be able to mold into an NFL starting caliber quarterback within 2 to 3 years in Cleveland. As we go on to the third round, 65th pick overall, Charlotte defensive lineman Larry Ogunjobi is the selection. This is a guy that has some size to him, 6'3", 305 pounds, some athleticism. Those are your first 2 pros. I think he plays with good leverage and power. He comes off the snap with good base. And again, being having a lower center of gravity, getting up under the pads of these offensive linemen. I think he does a really good job around the line of scrimmage of being a disruptive force. That's the next pro. I look at Larry Ogunjobi and I see flashes of a guy that can make plays and be disruptive, but around the line of scrimmage can collapse the pocket also. With a bull rush. And again, it all stems from him coming off the ball aggressively, low center of gravity, getting up under pads and winning the leverage battle. So you see all of these things. And again, you see them in waves. You don't see it as consistently enough at least not for my liking, but again, you see flashes of a guy that can be a problem at the next level. He has a very high football IQ. He does a great job of sniffing out screen plays, not fooled by the running back kind of delaying and looking like he's blocking and then trying to slip out and get out in space and get the blockers out in front. He does a really good job of getting out there and disrupting screens as well. So I think there's a lot of things to like with Larry Ogunjobi, but I didn't see enough, which is going to take me to my cons. Average impact on the game. I don't think, for a guy that I feel like is really talented and still scratching the surface, I think there's a lot more that you can get out of Larry Ogunjobi. I just don't think he impacts the game enough. I wanted to see him dominate at Charlotte. I wanted to see him take over games. I'm watching him against Georgia State. I just don't feel like he's impacting the game enough. I watched him against Louisville. I didn't think he did enough in that game. And so, again, Lamar Jackson, not the easiest guy, not the easiest offense to contain. But again, I just didn't feel like this guy did enough. I didn't feel like this was a guy that was out making enough plays, impacting the game enough to where he warranted a third-round pick in my mind. And again, maybe this selection is all about upside. If that's the case, more power to the Browns. But the next con is he misses tackles and sacks due to being over-aggressive. When this guy gets free and he's got a chance to make a tackle, every now and again, he'll ragdoll an offensive lineman, get to the ball carrier, sling him down on the ground. But for every 2 or 3 of those, there's an opportunity for him to get a sack, and the quarterback just gives him a sidestep. And he's so overzealous, so anxious to get to the quarterback that he just flat out whiffs. And then, once you get a 305-pounder going in one direction and you move, that guy's not going to be able to stop, turn on a dime, and pivot and go back and get the quarterback again. So I saw him miss at least 3 sack opportunities on tape where he's just over anxious, had the quarterback dead to right, and he just didn't take his time and missed the sack. I saw him have opportunities at tackles in the backfield for a loss. Now, his effort on the play led to one of his teammates cleaning up the mess that he started. However, he didn't actually make the play himself. But when you're talking defensive linemen, it's not always about the play you make. It's the play that you allow others to make. And so even in that space, I don't think he's done enough, or at least in the games that I watched, he didn't do enough even in that regard as far as creating for others around him. And then finally, he could be handled by double teams. I thought that he was okay at best in double team situations, but he didn't really stand his ground. Even big physical guards, I thought, were able to move him out of the way, let alone double teams. So this is a guy that, for all of the hype, and I heard a lot about Larry Ogunjobi prior to the draft, at the combine, through all of the different bowls after the season was over with. I wasn't impressed. I treat him like I treated Sheldon Rankins last year. I was not impressed. Everyone tried to sell me on the New Orleans Saints first-round pick a season ago, Sheldon Rankins, and I told you I wasn't impressed. And I'm telling you the same thing about Larry Ogunjobi. I'm not impressed with what I saw out of him on tape in the 3rd round, 65th pick overall. Charlotte defensive lineman Larry Ogunjobi, for me, is a double. I thought he was solid. He's a guy that looks like he has some upside, but I'm not wowed by what I saw on tape from Larry Ogunjobi. As we move on to the 4th round, 126th overall selection, Houston cornerback Howard Wilson is the selection. This is a guy with a little bit of height and length on him, 6'1", that height, that's the NFL going right now, 6 feet, 6'1", 6'2". The bigger, the better, the faster the corner, the more likely he is he's gonna have an opportunity to start out wide. Howard Wilson's got the height. He's also got the length. Now, he's only got like 31.5-inch arms, but when you look at him, I think his wingspan is a lot longer than his arms may indicate. This guy's got some length to him. And so that height and that length, you put those things together. And I've talked about longer corners all draft process long because there are a ton of big guys in this draft. That length gives you an opportunity, even when you're beaten down the field, to still recover and get back into the play. And Howard Wilson is one of those guys that has that ability. Outstanding closing burst. I watched him against Cincinnati, a game that he had 2 interceptions in, 1 went to the crib. He should have had 3 and 2 should have went to the crib. And it was because of his outstanding closing burst. He's one of those guys that the receiver looks open. He's in zone coverage. He reads the quarterback's eyes. And all of a sudden, the quarterback thinks he's throwing to an open target. And out of nowhere, here comes Howard Wilson snatching the football away and running the other way. And he did that in that Cincinnati game, went up, climbed the ladder, 50-50 ball down the field. He jumps up and snatches the football out of the air. And in a contested situation on a 50-50 ball for 1 pick. Should have had 1 on a pick 6 on an out-breaking route. Quarterback thought he had an opportunity to get it to the receiver. Wilson plants, drives, cuts in on the football, runs the route for the receiver, had it in his hands, bobbles it, drops it, would have been his pick 6. And then late in the ball game, zone coverage, quarterback's kind of off balance, under siege, throws it up for grabs. Wilson isn't in the picture when he lets it go, but by the time the ball gets there, Wilson comes in front of the receiver, reaches in front of him, extends, plucks the football out of the air, takes it the other way for a touchdown. So he has that kind of ability. That closing burst is dynamic. When he reads what the quarterback's trying to do, he breaks on the football very quickly. Able to climb the ladder in 50-50 ball situations. I just told you about the play against Cincinnati where he goes up the ladder and gets the interception. That height and length aids him in going up and getting the football and contesting the ball when it is up in the air. Keys quarterback's eyes well in zone and in off man. Plays a ton of off man. I thought he did well in off man. And if you watch him against Oklahoma, first game of the season against D.D. Westbrook and company, a lot of off man in that game. And that's a guy that knows his strengths and his weaknesses. If you know you run a 4-5-2, there's no reason to get up in a guy's face that's running a 4-4-2. Okay, stay back, give yourself some cushion and some space. And if they want the underneath stuff, you give it up, but you don't allow them to beat you over the top. I think he does a really good job in off man of playing receivers and coming up, driving on the football and contesting underneath throws. So again, a guy that does a really good job of keying quarterbacks' eyes when in zone and in off man coverage. Tremendous ball skills, 9 career interceptions in a very short, condensed amount of time. This is a guy that makes plays on the football. And again, I saw him drop an interception, but I also saw him make plays on the football as well. So this is a guy definitely with some ball skills that can go and get takeaways for the defense. And he will tackle. He'll come up. He'll be physical. Doesn't always see what he's hitting. One of those guys that loves to shoot the cuffs, go for your legs, but he goes hard and he comes aggressively. And again, I can respect that at the cornerback position as we go to his cons. His weight is a problem. He's 6'1". You'd love that to come with 205, 210 pounds. It's 184. So that tells you right there, they need to get him in the weight training program immediately. And so I expect them to do that with Howard Wilson because, again, in this league, receivers will big body you. If you're too small and you're a frail body boy, they will put you on their hip and they will box you out and they will go get the football. And so he's going to have to put on a little bit more weight to be effective at the next level. Speed. That's the next con. He's a 4.53 guy. There's no way around that. When you're 6'1", the back pedal's a little high. The transition isn't always the cleanest. And you couple that with a 4.5, 40, guy gets on top of you. He's got some length to recover, but if that guy's a blazer, that 4.53 not really going to come in handy and save you. And so again, I think he plays to his strengths. I told you, against D.D. Westbrook, a lot of off-man coverage. He knows his role and he plays it well, and I don't have a problem with that. Don't come up in a guy's face and challenge him and then get smoked off the line of scrimmage. And if you know you can't keep up with that guy long distance speed-wise, don't even bother. And finally, the last 2 cons. Limited experience as a starter. He only had 1 year. This 2016 season was his only season as a starter. He was supposed to start in 2015 across from William Jackson III and ended up getting injured in the first game of the season, or I think 3 games in. He gets injured on an interception that he makes. He gets injured, tears his knee up, misses the remainder of the season. So didn't play as much as he would have liked to at Houston. Only had 1 full season of starting. So you're talking about a guy with 1 year of full experience. And then the torn ACL in 2015 that I just referenced, that's also a con. Got the interception 3rd game into the season, tears his ACL, watches William Jackson III explode into a 1st-round pick. Meanwhile, he's on the sideline nursing an injury. Comes back in 2016, performs well. But again, this is a guy that only started for 1 year, and he played well off that torn ACL. So in the 4th round, 126th overall selection, Houston cornerback Howard Wilson for me is a double. I like a lot of the intangibles that he brings to the table, the ball skills, the size, the length. These are all things that I really admire in his game. Problem is, he's not fast. He needs to put on more weight. The 1 year of experience, that's questionable. There's a lot of questions here. I think this guy may have the answers, but we're going to find out together. But when I have a lot of questions, not enough answers, I go back to a double. That's where I'm going with Howard Wilson. As we move on to the 5th round, 160th pick overall, Florida State offensive lineman Roderick Johnson is the selection. 6'7", 298. Height and length are the first 2 pros. 6'7", great size for an NFL tackle. So are his vines and telephone poles for arms. 36-inch arms. That is phenomenal. Generally, you don't get much bigger than that in terms of arms. So right then and there, he has the measurables in terms of height and length to be an NFL starting tackle. He's solid in the run game. I think he does his best work as a run blocker. I think he struggles in the pass game, but it's some things that I think people think they can clean up. I don't know if they can be cleaned up or not. But I don't know if this is a guy that, if he doesn't work at tackle, is a candidate to kick inside the guard because of his size. He's so big. I don't know if he fits as an NFL guard. We'll see. But right now, tackle is the name of the game for this guy. And I think he's really solid in the run game. A lot of big runs that were put forth by Dalvin Cook and that Florida State offense came on the left side of the offensive line behind Roderick Johnson. He can get out and run. For a guy that seems to be very slow laterally, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, he can actually get up the field and run. He looks athletic. He looks like a guy that is very fluid out in space. Again, surprising, because when I watch him get out of his stance and shuffle laterally, I'm looking at this guy and I say, this guy's stuck in mud. He can't move, but yet when he's running forward, he has no problems getting up the field. Can recover. That length, all right, it affords you so many opportunities as an offensive tackle to lose a rep initially, but still get back into play and ultimately win the rep. You can lose off the snap to just pure unadulterated speed, but if you have the length, 36-inch arms affords you the opportunity to still push a guy just enough that a quarterback can step up in the pocket and deliver the football. So he can recover even when he's beaten at times. And then finally, there's durability and upside with Roderick Johnson. He had 31 consecutive starts spanning the middle of the 2014 season all the way to 2016. Did not miss a start at Florida State in that period of time. And also, there's upside here with this guy. I don't think that he's a finished product. He needs to put on weight. Obviously, 298 pounds. Speaking of which, let's get to his cons. All right, balance issues. This is a guy that I get really upset watching him on tape because he consistently leans and is lunging at his target. A lot of that has to do with the fact that he's not fast out of his stance, and his lateral quickness is lacking severely, which is the next con, and I'll talk about that in a second. But let's talk about this balance for a second. This guy gets bull rushed more than I've ever seen of a quote-unquote elite tackle. And again, there weren't many elite tackles in this draft. 5th round isn't an elite tackle, but he played at Florida State, got a ton of accolades. You would think that this guy was immovable at the left tackle position, and yet I'm watching game after game, guy after guy, absolutely jack Roderick Johnson up, put his ass on skates, and bull rush him into the lap of the quarterback. It was ridiculous. I watched him against Florida. They are just tearing his ass up in the bull rush game. I'm watching him against, who else did I watch him against? I watched him in a number of games. I think I might have watched him against Clemson, and they're just tearing him up, putting him on skates. I didn't even bother to watch the Michigan game because I was afraid of what I would have seen. I just knew I watched him in like 3 or 4 different games, and he struggled in every single one of them with the bull rush. He's on the ground constantly. He just struggles with balance. That's a problem for me as a left tackle. He's got horrible lateral agility, which I think contributes to him leaning and lunging because he's not comfortable with speed attacking him to the outside shoulder. So he starts to lean and lunge because he panics. It forces him to open up too quickly, doesn't have the ability to redirect quick enough. There's just a number of problems that stem from his lack of lateral agility. He's very slow in getting out of his stance in those kick steps and those first couple of steps, they are extremely, extremely slow, especially for a guy that out in space when he's moving forward moves pretty well. So it's kind of a stark contrast. His lateral agility is lacking severely. His hands and feet are everywhere. That's the final con. They're not in unison with each other. His punch doesn't line up with when he's got a firm and erect base so that it can actually push back the defensive lineman. His feet are kind of moving at a different rate than his hands. Everything just seems to be out of whack. There's no continuity, no togetherness with his hands nor his feet. And when you get that with an offensive lineman, you get a guy that's out of sorts. You get a guy that can get bull rush. You get a guy that doesn't get out of his stance quickly. You get a guy that doesn't have a supremely potent punch. You get a guy that struggles. And I saw a guy that struggled at times. In the run game, I thought he was outstanding. In the pass game, I thought he was a liability a lot of the time. And so with Roderick Johnson, I'm not sold that this is a guy that's going to be the answer. Now, again, with coaching, with time, with more weight, this guy could turn out to be a steal for you in the 5th round because the measurables, you can't teach 6'7", 36-inch arms. You either have that or you don't. So from that standpoint right there, this is a guy that you feel like could potentially get it done for you. But when you're talking about a guy that struggles in so many different areas, I just don't know if he's going to be able to get it together in enough time to be a proficient offensive lineman for the Cleveland Browns. But this is why you take a guy like this in the 5th round, because he's a project. You want to work with him. He has a lot of tools, and you see what you can get. And if the return on investment is what you're looking for with a 5th round pick in the 5th round, 160th overall selection, Florida State offensive lineman Roderick Johnson for me is a double. A lot of things to work with here, but this guy needs a ton of work, if you ask me. 6th round, 185th overall selection, Florida defensive lineman Caleb Brantley is the pick. This is tremendous value. Not going to break him down. I already did in the Draft Prospects 101 series. So this tells you that this guy doesn't belong here in the 6th round. If I broke him down in the Draft Prospects 101 series, that tells you that I expected this guy to come off the board relatively early, probably within the first 2 rounds. The fact that he's sitting here in the 6th round means you got yourself a steal potentially. Now, there are some off the field issues, which is why he's here in the 6th round. Had an altercation with a female outside of a club, very close proximity to the draft. You don't know what's going to come of that situation. He could see jail time for that. So there isn't any guarantee here with Caleb Brantley. However, the talent is undeniable. I think he's a good football player. I don't think he's great. I actually thought his teammate from 2015 that was selected by the Bears in the 2nd round was better than him when I watched him on tape. But Caleb Brantley, a lot of people thought was a 1st round selection. I didn't think he was a 1st round talent. Thought he was a 2nd round talent, but nonetheless, he's a talent. And to get him in the 6th round, this is a major pickup for a Browns team that is acquiring massive amounts of talent in the draft. And this is another guy that is highly skilled and talented. Again, will the off the field issues come back to haunt him and make this pick irrelevant? We'll see. But in any event, for this type of value, this late in the draft, you got to feel like you absolutely stole in the 6th round, 185th overall selection. Florida defensive lineman Caleb Brantley for me is a triple. This is a tremendous pick, tremendous value. Generally, you don't get triples this late in the draft from me, but this is an exception to that rule. Caleb Brantley has no business being on the board in the 6th round, but the off the field issues, and the Browns are in a position where you can take a flyer on a guy with this much talent this late in the draft. Love this selection for the Browns. As we move on to the 7th round, 2 7th round selections, the first of which 224th overall, Arizona State place kicker Zane Gonzalez is the pick. He's a place kicker, so I don't have a ton to say, but I will say this. The Browns lost games directly attributed to the place kicking position a season ago. It started out bad. It got worse. They ended up having to go out on the streets around week 3 or 4 or 5 to find a kicker. They get the old ex-Philadelphia Eagles kicker. He comes in, stinks it up against the Dolphins in a game that they should have won, misses a gimme and a chippy right at the end of the game, goes to overtime. The Dolphins are able to win that game in a game that the Dolphins had no business winning. I could clearly attribute at least 3 games to your place kicking position as losses. And so This was a need, a desperate need. And you go out and you get the best kicker. And I've seen 3 kickers drafted thus far in my travels through this draft. And that's a lot. I don't recall seeing that many kickers getting drafted. And I think you may have gotten the best one of the bunch. Zane Gonzalez was looked at as one of the best kickers in the nation. 23 of 25 in 2016 in his field goal kicks. That's a really high percentage. 7 of 9 on field goals, 50 and above. That's ridiculous. Okay, that means this guy has a tremendous leg, and that's highly efficient from 50 and above. Okay, that's NFL distance. That's money from that distance. You're talking about a guy that was 13 of 15 from 40 yards and above, which includes that 7 of 9 from 50 and above. So you're talking about a guy that was outstanding from 40 and above. And I call 40 to 49 the money distance in the league. He was 6 of 6 from 40 yards to 49 yards. So you're talking about a guy that was outstanding when his team called on him from 40 yards and above. And he had 3 more makes than any other kicker in the nation from 40 and above. So that tells you all you need to know about how much better I think that he was from the rest of the field at the field goal kicking position in college football. Hit a 59-yarder at Colorado. Again, at Colorado. Think about that and put that in proper perspective. Still takes a big leg kicker to get that done, even though it's in Colorado. 16 of 16 in field goals under 50 yards. That includes the 9 or 6 for 6 from 40 to 49. So again, this guy was outstanding. Only missed 2 kicks, and both of them were 50 plus. And then he had 60 of his 79 kickoffs go for touchback. So big leg kicker, highly accurate. This is exactly what you need. And again, I love when teams draft kickers in the 7th round. You want to draft a kicker, take him in the 7th round. This was a desperate need for this Browns team, a kicker to come in and compete. He's going to win this job if he does what he did at Arizona State. I love this selection, so much so that in the 7th round, 224th pick overall, Arizona State place kicker Zane Gonzalez for me is a triple. You need kickers in this league. We don't talk enough about kickers until they start effing up. You get a good kicker and he becomes a weapon for you. Go ask the Baltimore Ravens how much of a weapon Just Incredible, aka Justin Tucker, is for them. Go ask the Cowboys how big of a weapon their kicker is for them. You have a great kicker, you have a chance to do great things in this league, because you know all I need to do is get within striking distance and I've got a shot to put points on the scoreboard. And that's what Zane Gonzalez could potentially be for the Cleveland Browns moving forward. As we wrap up their draft in the 7th round, 252nd pick overall, NC State running back Matt Days is the selection. Agility and cutback vision, or agility and cutback ability, are his first pros. I think he has outstanding agility and quickness. The cutback ability is outstanding, which leads me to my next pro, solid vision. He does a really good job of setting up blocks and then cutting it back, using that vision to set up plays and then cut back against the grain and make some really highly skilled cuts to pick up some extra yardage when there may not be as much there. So I think he creates a lot of things within that NC State offense. Good patience and one cut ability is the next pro. I think he does a really good job in a zone scheme of pressing the hole, which is the next pro, presses holes well. Does a great job of getting that football, going down the line, pressing the hole until something develops, really patient to the line, and then he explodes through the hole. I think he does a really good job of setting things up, setting blocks up, and then cutting off of those blocks. Ability to make defenses miss. He's got the rare ability to string cuts together. Again, not the fastest guy in the world, but does an extremely good job of stringing cuts together, making guys miss out in space. Gets more yards due to missed tackles off of guys not even laying a finger on him because of his ability to make guys miss out in space. Viable pass catcher and pass protector. I think he does a quality job of putting his body out on the line in pass protecting situations. I also think he can catch it out of the backfield, was a big weapon for NC State in the returns game at one point, as a running back out of the backfield and as a pass catcher out of the backfield. I think he's a very reliable pass catcher. And versatility. Like I said, this is a guy that offers you some special teams value as a return man if need be. I don't think you're going to need him to do that. I think you got enough speed in other areas for guys to handle those duties for you. But in any event, can offer you that if you need to in a pinch, can catch it out of the backfield, can run it, can be on a third down guy if he makes this team. I look at him as a poor version of a guy that you already have in Duke Johnson. So I think it's going to be tough for Matt Days to crack this roster. But we'll see what happens, because you never know. Injuries happen in this league. He may be able to take advantage of a situation, but I think he's a poor man's Duke Johnson without the speed. Speaking of which, cons, his size, 5'9", 205. He's got a solid size, but at 5'9", you don't think he's going to be able to carry the load at 205. And I don't think the Browns are going to ask him to do that in any event. Lack of home run speed. This is why this guy's here in the 7th round, literally the penultimate pick before Mr. Irrelevant. This was a guy that a lot of people thought was going to be a second, third, possibly 4th round back, no further than 4th round for Matt Days. And then he worked out in the offseason and he didn't work out well. He ran a 4.66 40, which I knew he wasn't going to run extremely fast, but I didn't expect him to run a 4.66. So I think a lot of teams were turned off by that. They looked at him as a dime a dozen back at that point. Had he run a 4.55, I think he's a 3rd or 4th round back. But that 4.66 scared the hell out of teams. I look at him as a Justin Forsett type. Okay, just tough, gritty, does everything good, nothing great. And those kind of guys have a career and a living in the NFL. And so he's going to end up somewhere. But I think the 7th round with the Browns means he's a long shot to crack this roster. Goes down easily upon contact. He's not, and I talked about him being a Justin Forsett type. Forsett was tough. He didn't go down upon initial contact. This is a guy that doesn't make a ton of guys miss after contact. He can make you miss without contact, but once you get your hands on Matt Days, he usually goes down after that contact. And then he had a toe injury in 2015 as a final con. He responded well in 2016 and played really well, had his most rush yards of his career, became the first NC State running back in over a decade to eclipse 1,000 yards rushing. So he had his most prolific season all-purpose wise outside of the return yards in 2016. So he rebounded well off the toe injury. So I think that's behind him. But nonetheless, in the 7th round, 252nd pick overall, NC State running back Matt Days is a double to round out what I thought was an outstanding and by far the best draft of 2017 thus far that I've had a chance to take a look at for the Cleveland Browns. Let's get a score for this outstanding draft as we go and tally up what they were able to accomplish. 3 home runs to start the draft back to back to back in Myles Garrett, Jabrill Peppers, and then David Njoku. Then you have 3 triples, which nets you a triples bonus in Deshaun Kaiser, Caleb Brantley, and Zane Gonzalez. 6th and 7th round picks, mind you. So you're doing work late in the draft. I told you from start to finish, this was an outstanding draft. And then you have 4 doubles, which nets you 2 doubles bonuses in Larry Ogunjobi, Howard Wilson, Roderick Johnson, and Matt Days as well. So 4 doubles, which equals 2 doubles bonuses. You tally all of that up. It's a 40 divided by the number of picks, 10, and it's a home run for the Cleveland Browns in the 2017 NFL draft, the 2nd home run given out in this draft wrap-up series this season. Outstanding draft. This is probably one of the best drafts I've ever seen in terms of score-wise, just because you don't generally get 10 picks and still get a home run. It's tough to do, but they did such a great job start to finish that I just thought it was an outstanding haul and a really good job of identifying talent, taking risk on guys, and also filling needs on your football team. I thought they did an outstanding job in all of that. So that's going to do it for the Cleveland Browns in their 2017 NFL Draft wrap-up. If it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here on the Louie T Network. Come back and join me as I continue to break down anything. And now, National Football League, I've got one question for you, just one. Who's next?